I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With all what's going on in the geopolitical sphere and the economic sphere, wouldn't it be great to have an expert in both? Somebody who's a great writer and a journalist, and somebody who has a PhD in economics and maybe had a high position in the Treasury Department at one time? Yes, that would be Paul Craig Roberts, who has a PhD in economics, was the Assistant Treasury Secretary at the in the Reagan Administration, and is an award-winning journalist who has got paulcraigroberts.org, worked for the Wall Street Journal before they decided he was too honest for him. Paul Craig Roberts, thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Pleased to be with you, Greg.
Let's start with the obvious crazy that the radical Marxist Democrats are trying to take the country in and trying to destroy the country. Your thoughts on what's the big picture, what they're trying to accomplish? What are they doing?
Well, I think they're trying to give impunity to violence that's conducted in the name of opposing white racism. So, if you want to take action against white racism, which includes all white people, because by definition, if you're white, you're racist. So any violence against white racism is legitimate, and therefore it would be illegitimate to try to stop that violence. So this is the reason the Democrats have not taken any action to prevent or quell or control the rioting, the looting, and the burning, because law and order is white privilege, and white privilege upholds racism, and therefore law and order is in the way of justice. So that's the way they reason. This kind of reasoning has been shaping up over many years. It's part of cultural Marxism. It's part of identity politics. And now it's come into its own. So what you see is impunity given to violence that is justified as action against whites.
The Main Street Press, which you were a part of, and so was I. You were in the Wall Street Journal. You were a big hitter for them. I used to read your stuff when I was at CNN. And I thought, wow, I can't believe they're letting this guy say this stuff. So it was just the truth. Boing, pie in the face. But it's a cartoon. These people think that they are journalists and they are propagandists. They are not journalists. Up until this week, for 90 days, they were telling us that that protests were mostly peaceful. It was almost a cartoon with the picture of the black reporter with the flames 15 feet over his head or 20, 30 feet over his head with a respirator and goggles on with a crawl saying the protests are mostly peaceful. I mean, what do you make of the coverage of this, being you've had actually two big careers in the Treasury and PhD in economics, which we're going to get to some of the financial stuff in a minute, but also you're award-winning journalist in your own right at paulcraigroberts.org. What do you make of the state of the propaganda media now?
You see, white people are deracinated.
I'm sorry, what?
They're deracinated.
What does that mean?
All right, it means they have, through decades of propaganda against them and against their civilization and its behavior, they've lost confidence in their race. They've lost confidence in their accomplishments. They've lost confidence in their culture, and they're filled with a sense of guilt for all the wrongs they have been taught that they are responsible for. So that's what happens if you deracinate a people. They lose confidence and they can't defend themselves. They can't defend statues, for example, associated with their history. And so they permit the statues to be torn down. They permit the stores to be burned and looted. And they just haven't the confidence to defend themselves. And so they just get caught up in the accusations. And so white people are the people who can be freely accused of anything. It's not a hate crime. It's not hate speech. There's no political correctness as to how you have to speak to a white person. And so that's just the culture they've been born into.
And what do you make of the media? I mean, we just had a guy. I don't know if you saw this video, just this past week, or just last few days. Some black guy runs up behind him with a brick and hammers him in the back of the head. He doesn't even see the guy coming, and hammers him in the back of the head. And he falls down, boom, cold in front. They're laughing. They're taking video of this. They think it's a big joke. So what do you think of the media's coverage of what they're doing? Why is the media doing? Are they just totally in the pocket of the globalist, Marxist evil? I mean, they think they're journalists, and which we know they're not. They're propagandists. They're weasels. Well, why is the media acting the way they're doing? What's their goal?
I think it's what I said. You know, the media, for the most part, is still white, and they're deracinated. And you know, identity politics teaches that whites are responsible for the oppression of everybody else, and all the crimes in the world. You know, colonialism, imperialism, etc. It goes on and on. This is what they've been teaching in universities for decades, and it's finally taken hold and had an effect. You know, most of this Antifa and Black Lives Matter, as far as I can tell, are white people. The polls show that 80% of Black Americans are totally opposed to this riot. It's something that's led by and financed by white people. And these people that they seem to be largely university people. And they have had the decades of propaganda that whites are evil. They do evil things to everybody. They colonialize them. They put them in slavery. They invade them. They do all these things. And there's a lot of truth in that, but it's not done for racist reasons. That is what I think is going on. What you're watching is the collapse of white self-confidence. And so they're simply being moved aside.
Well, I mean, what they want to do is take over America, isn't that what this really is? I mean, you've had Angela Davis, the former, activist or current activist, say, we're just using this as a cover. We want to overthrow America. I mean, that's really what they want to do. They want to say, hey, you're racist, you're evil, you need to turn everything over to us now. That's what they're basically saying, aren't they?
Well, it can look like that, but I just don't know how much it has to do with them. I don't think this is a globalist or a Marxist thing. I think this is, you see, traditionally liberals have used denunciation as a way of achieving reforms. They chose that path, I think, because of the sort of Puritan streak that was in the New England Americans. You use denunciation to force a reform. And so denunciation becomes, takes the place of persuasion, instead of trying to persuade people to do better or give reforms, be more open to others. It becomes denunciation. And so once you have denunciation as your method of achieving progress, and the target of denunciation is an existing white society, because the United States was a white society, then whites become the target. They become the people who are responsible for everything that needs to be corrected. So it's open season on them. And it's no longer restrained by the willingness of whites to stand up for themselves or to use the positions of authority and power that they have. Instead, they use the positions of power and authority against the whites. And when you have people who are elected mayors and they say, well, law and order is a white privilege.
Well, that's just kooky.
Well,
I mean, I'm not saying you're kooky. I'm just they're kooky. I mean, when they say that, you're right. They are saying that. I mean, Ted Wheeler in Portland said, "We just let it burn itself out." I'm like, wow, just let the rapists rape until they get tired, or the robbers rob until they get all the money they need. I mean, it's so stupid.
but it's not that. It's a real ideology,
Ugh.
and it's extremely dangerous. And it's really the ruling ideology. It's far more powerful than patriotism. It's not people being silly and stupid. This is a dangerous ideology. In fact, it's everywhere. You just said, let the rapists rape until they're tired of it. Well, that's what happens in Sweden. The Swedish women are afraid to leave their homes. They get raped on street corners by the Muslims and the darks they've let in from the third world. And if the police say anything about it, they get fired. It's a hate crime. The women are even afraid to report. If they get raped by a black man, they're afraid to report it because they get accused of a hate crime. And this is the situation in Sweden and to some extent in Norway. And Germany and Italy have similar problems. It seems to be worse in Sweden. So in other words, the feminist Swedish government will not defend Swedish women. And because they're white, and it's racist to defend white people.
Don't you think there's a backlash brewing? I mean, even among, you have Theo Terrell, who is a black, pretty famous civil rights attorney. He's left the Democrat Party. He's going to vote for Donald Trump. He says it's going to be the biggest wave of black people voting for Donald Trump in the history of America. He just said this. Also, I think there's a big backlash brewing against all this. I think voters, I think even Democrats, are looking at their cities burning to the ground, going, "Whoa, this is a bridge too far." I mean, this has gone haywire. I mean, you can't sell your house in Portland. You can't sell your house in Chicago. You can't sell your house in Minneapolis. I mean, this is now become an economic situation. Isn't there going to be a big backlash building? I'm not open for fomenting a civil war, but it looks like there's a big backlash building right now. We'll start with the black community is going to vote overwhelmingly, or a large chunk, not overwhelmingly, but a large chunk, according to people like Theo Terrell in polls out, that are going to vote big time for Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's not a large chunk. It's a larger chunk of blacks voting Republican than previously, but it's still less than a third. But that's more than, say, 15%. So, yes, I think particularly blacks who have been successful, they have a stake in the system, and they see that this is undoing the system. If there's no law and order, you can't have business. And you certainly don't want to have a home in a city in which there's no law and order. So successful blacks who have made their way, they're opposed to this. So are successful anybody. I mean, the Asians are very much opposed to this. As far as I can tell, the Hispanics are. I would say that the successful blacks, Asians, and Hispanics are more opposed to it than the whites.
Wow.
Because they haven't been demonized. They haven't been blamed for all the evils in the world, and the whites have. So they have more confidence. It's the white people who lack confidence because of the constant demonization. Look, we're beating a dead horse here. Let me just give some examples. For example, we now know that white employees of every company in every state, local, federal government agency have to take mandatory sensitivity training. The whites, particularly the white men. And they have to stand up in meetings and they get accused, and they say, the people running the meetings point to them and say, these are the oppressors of the women and the minorities. And the white guys have to stand there and take all of these insults. This is everywhere. It just hit the news that the Sandia National Laboratories, which is the nuclear weapons design lab, is entirely government funded. Okay, well there, the white employees have had to go take sensitivity training, and they have to basically confess that because they're white and because they're males, that they're misogynist and they're racist. And it's become a real issue because one of them, who's had enough of this, did a video.
Yep.
And put it online. His name is Peterson, something Peterson. And the Sandia executives have gone bananas. They've locked him out of the email system, so he can't get any support from his 16,000 colleagues who are tired of being accused constantly of everything. And now they put him on administrative leave, and they're investigating whether or not he has compromised their security system by complaining of anti-white discrimination. In other words, it's the white employees in the company who are being discriminated against by the white bosses. And this is everywhere. Because of my column, I get lots of feedback from people. They say they hate their job, from white males. They hate their jobs because their female bosses, their black bosses are hostile to them. So are their white bosses. They say the only way the white boss got to be a boss was by being anti-white. They all pray to get an Asian boss because the Asians judge them not by an anti-white male ideology, but by their performance.
Wow.
They all tell me they have to go to these sensitivity trainings, and you have to sit there while see, there's all kinds of companies now that go and hold sensitivity trainings.
Could you imagine making black people stand up and say, you're the reason why your crime is high, you're the reason why you should confess that you're bad because of your color? Could you imagine telling black people to stand up in a sensitivity training meeting?
They wouldn't do it. They have too much confidence. But you see, the whites don't have any confidence. They're deracinated. They've been beat up for 70 years of propaganda, and it's finally it's taken its toll. And where are the whites standing up? Hardly any of them.
Boy, that's a sad. I'm glad. Listen, I'm glad I got you on. I'm not arguing with you. I'm glad I got you on.
They lack the confidence.
And people are feedbacking to you with all these articles you're writing, and because you're Paul Craig Roberts, you're the man. And you're getting tons of feedback that this is happening all over the country.
Look, if you stand up for yourself, what was the couple in Minneapolis that went out with guns? Yeah, well, you get indicted. If a white guy stands up, now look, what was the 17-year-old kid that shot a few of them who were trying to kill him?
Yeah, Kyle, what's his name? Can't remember his last name. Yeah.
Rittenhouse.
Rittenhouse, yeah, that's right, that's it.
All right, well, the videos show that they actually were trying to kill him. And one of them has a pistol in his hand.
That's right.
And so he's indicted for murder. Well, he's defending himself. He didn't go out to shoot people, but they attacked him, and he couldn't get away. Well, he's indicted. So you see how one-sided it is. Now, did they indict the people burning down the stores and looting them? No. So when you have highly trained professionals who, because they're white, have to listen to being denounced in the audience of their workforce and being told that to be white is a privilege, and it means that you're racist because you're white and you have white privilege. Well, what kind of privilege do they have when they have to stand there and be denounced? That's not privilege. It's like you said, it's not the blacks they're doing that to. And who's doing it to these white people? Mainly it's white women. Most of these firms, sensitivity training, they're run by feminists who hate men. So if you're white, you get it because you're white, and then you get it because you're a male. And this is mandatory in these firms. It's mandatory state, local government, federal government.
This is obvious racism. This is obvious sexism. Could you imagine staking women and having them stand up in a class and saying, "Because you're women, you're stupid, or you're causing all the problems. It's because you have whatever." I mean, could you imagine doing that to a woman, telling them that they have to apologize for being a woman?
See, they're protected by feminism. It's a strong movement. It has lots of confidence.
Wow.
So, and blacks now have a lot of confidence because they've been told that their situation is due to oppression. And so if they commit a crime, it's not because they committed a crime, it's because of oppression.
You wrote a piece about how on NPR, which I think should be defunded, how they're justifying looting. It's reparations.
Right. The NPR, there was an article, it was written by Natalie Escobar, and she's reporting on a book that just came out, I think, last week, by Vicky Osterweiler, called In Defense of Looting. And once again, since law and order are white privileges, looting is valid, as long as it's looting in the name of blacks. Now, it's not okay for white people to go loot. And she kind of evades the issue of how come there's so many white Antifas and so many white BLMs. But blacks can't, or whites can do it if they're doing it for blacks or in the name of blacks.
Wow.
For example, here's what she says. Okay, the world is organized for the profit of the people who own the stores and the factories, and those people are white. So you get to the heart of the property relation, and you demonstrate that without police and without state oppression, we can have things for free.
Wow.
So the only reason everything is free to the blacks is the whites have the police. And this is what they mean when they say law and order is a white privilege. Now, here's another statement. The very basis of property in the United States is derived through whiteness and through black oppression, through the history of slavery and settler domination of the country. Looting strikes at the heart of property, at the heart of whiteness and of the police. It gets to the very root of the way these three things are interconnected, and it also provides people with an imaginative sense of freedom and pleasure, and helps them imagine a world that could be. And the part that doesn't really get talked about is that riots and looting, these people are experiencing a sort of joy and liberation.
Huh.
So this is the apology for it. And it's the reason the Democrats don't enforce law and order, because law and order protections for white people. And anything that protects white people sustains the system. It continues the oppression of black people.
You know, half the businesses.
You can laugh and say how silly it is, but it is a powerful ideology. You can see it operating.
No, I'm not laughing. No, I
in
believe
all
you.
Democratic-run cities, you're sitting there watching this ideology operate.
Yeah.
And so it has to be taken seriously. It's dangerous. And it's particularly dangerous when the whites have lost enough confidence that they don't. I mean, you got to ask yourself, what kind of population does Portland have? I mean, it's something like 93% white to elect these crazy people they have running the city. These anti-white racists. You know, the mayor and the city council in Portland, in Seattle, these are anti-white racists, even though themselves they're white.
Wow.
So what's wrong with the populations that they put people in office who will not defend whites or their property? So you can see it's gone a long ways.
Yeah. You know what? The police chief in Raleigh a couple of months ago came out and said, I'm going to put my officers out there just to defend people's property. Oh, well, really? So you just decided to not be a cop, and thanks for the health care and vision and dental and all the paychecks and all that. And you're not going to do your jobs. This is a police chief of Raleigh. Came out and said they wouldn't stop. Raleigh's a mess. They've been rioting in Raleigh. The press won't cover it in my state. It won't cover it.
I think I've heard there've been routing in 400 cities.
That's outrageous. In Greensboro, they did $1 million worth of damage and windows busted downtown. For the grace of God, they only burned down one mattress store.
But Greg, don't you see? This illustrates the point I've been trying to make.
You're making a good one.
There's no confidence in white society. The whites have lost confidence. They're simply going to be moved aside, even though they're a majority. They're simply going to be moved aside. They can't. They haven't got the confidence to stand up for themselves.
Let's talk about the money here. Gold. We haven't talked about it a lot. I mean, you're a former Assistant Treasury Secretary. You're a PhD in economics. I mean, you're a whole other sphere of your world here. I mean, I really kind of understated your credentials. They're deep. But let's talk about gold. It's $19.75 an ounce as we do this interview. Silver's been $28.50, $29. What's going on with what's gold saying about the economy? What's silver saying about the economy?
Greg, I imagine that after the many years of quantitative easing and all the money that came out, and now after all the money that came out during COVID, they ran up many trillions of dollars of additional money creation. And now with the situation that the economy is still very bad, there's still a lot of unemployment and lost businesses. The kinds of budget deficits that we're running are massive. And so finally, it's dawning on few people that, they may be printing too much paper for it to be worth much. And they can't print gold, silver, so maybe we should own some gold, silver. And of course, recently the dollar index has been falling. That is, the dollar is losing a bit of value relative to other paper currencies that I guess haven't printed as much. So I think that what you're seeing here is just awareness that so much paper money has been printed for so long and is being printed now, and it looks like will be printed into the future, that some people are overcoming the propaganda against gold and silver and saying, well, maybe we should have some, because then at least we have something that can't print. So I think that's what you're seeing. The danger to the money printing has always been, as I've always stressed with you on the shows, that it affects the dollar. If you reach the point that you print so many dollars that the rest of the world starts running away from them, then they lose value. And if they lose enough value that the dollar loses its reserve currency role, the United States government can't cover its trade deficit by creating more debt. And so our power would be gone. So what we see now is that all of this money creation may be finally putting pressure on the dollar. And the way you can measure the pressure on the dollar is the rising gold and silver price. So if that continues, it goes on up, and you see the dollar under pressure, at some point the Fed's going to have to make a decision. Do we continue to support the stock and bond market to keep financial asset prices up? Or have we got to let them go and let interest rates rise to draw people back into dollars? That will be a new kind of crisis. I can't predict that it will happen or when it would happen. But at some point, if the dollar becomes endangered as the world reserve currency, that goes to the heart of United States power.
Wow.
And so that then tends to prevail over other considerations. And so gold and silver, the rise in the price, is an indication of some loss of confidence in the dollar. Whether it's enough to do any real damage remains to be seen.
Well, it's going to come right down to just what that one simple question is: do we raise interest rates to defend the dollar, or do we keep it low and leave the stock market run?
That's right.
Wow.
Eventually, I think they'll have to face that.
And is gold and silver rising telling you that this decision is coming near?
No, it's not rising that much. I mean, gold was $1,900 in 2011.
Yeah.
So it's really just kind of gotten back to where it was 9 years ago. We discussed many times how they suppress the gold price by selling naked shorts on the future market. Yeah. So maybe they can't do that anymore. Maybe the stocks of gold are too low. I just don't know.
Just so people know that you did research and proven this. I think Dave Kranzler, many times. You've been over this many times and proven that they are suppressing the price of gold and silver. This is you are a former Assistant Treasury Secretary, just so people know this is just some wild-eyed claim that you've proven this.
The data showed it, Greg. It's not a claim. The data proved it. But whether they can still do it, I don't know. If they can, apparently not as well, because the gold price has gone back up. Now, it got over 2,000, but it got knocked down. Now, was this done in the futures market, or was it just speculators taking short-term profits? We'll just have to see, if it goes on back up. I think if the gold price starts hitting 2,500, 3,000, then the Fed knows it's got a problem.
Ha. That's your line of demarcation.
Well, not if it takes 10 years, but if it happens fairly quickly. If the gold price just starts going up and it stops going up, getting knocked down, and going up, getting knocked down, and it just starts moving up, and that would tell the Fed that the time is close at hand. They'll have to make some kind of determination. Now, you have to remember they can always do what Franklin Delano Roosevelt did and just seize gold. You have to remember it was illegal for Americans to own gold until sometime in the 1970s when Senator Jesse Helms got a law passed that Americans could own gold again. And they started buying Krugerrands, the South African gold coin. So they can always just confiscate gold again. They can pass a law, you can't own gold. They can do the same with silver. A threatened government will do whatever it thinks it needs to do. So, because the government is not us, it's the big guys. It's the money.
Yeah.
And they don't want to ruin their own fortunes, their own. And so much of what they have is dollar denominated. So they don't want the dollar to become like the German mark, during the 20s. So at some point, the currency will probably have to be defended. And of course, they're just hoping that the rest of the world is in such trouble and turmoil that whatever we do doesn't reflect any worse on us than what everybody else is doing and reflects on them. In which case, they just keep kicking the can down the road.
They even on CNN this past week, I mean, you had Lemon and Cuomo, the faux non-journalists that they are, talking about how, well, the polls are bringing down Biden because they're all phony. I think he's already been behind. He just had an event in Pennsylvania. I think he had 36 people there. I counted them. There's 36 people, and they're all worried that the violence is gonna hurt the Democrat Party. And this is being verbalized now on CNN. And what comes out, bam, in the White House propaganda conference, I hate to call them press, they're out there now saying, hey, your supporters, and now they're bringing up the violence, and it's your supporters, and you're the ones causing the violence, and everybody, all the mayors are, and the Democrats are, oh, it's Donald Trump's America, and it's your violence. And I don't think people are that stupid to bite on that. But do you think the violence is going to backfire on the Democrats and put Trump back into the White House?
Well, it should. It should.
This happened with Nixon back in the 70s.
Well, I'm afraid this is totally different from those days.
Okay.
There wasn't any identity politics. There wasn't any belief that whiteness is evil. We have to get rid of whiteness. That being white means you're racist. That wasn't alive during Nixon's days. This is a different time, Greg. And so it should. The question is, why do the polls show Biden in the lead?
Because they're phony, just like Clinton was in.
I think that's probably the case. Yeah. They used to say that the true conservative was the mugged liberal, the liberal who had gotten mugged on the streets, and all of a sudden he realized that there was a problem. So it could be that all these unreal white liberals who elect such terrible governments as Portland and Seattle and Chicago and New York and Minneapolis, they may say, wait a minute, we're burning ourselves out.
Yeah.
If it doesn't take hold, then you'll know they're just too far gone.
Well, they're moving out of New York. The reports are 500,000 move. These are people that have money. And, of course, de Blasio is just sloughing it off. But you can't even get a moving truck out of New York. Rents in New York are falling like a brick. Sales in New York are falling. Outside of New York, they're skyrocketing. 70% increase, 100% increase in property values. Unbelievable. 50, 60, 80 miles from New York City. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they're that stupid that they'll keep voting Democrat. But you're handicapping the race. I guess I'm just trying to get what's your hand? Do you think Trump will win re-election or not?
If the Democrats don't steal it, you can use. You see, this mail-in voting. It's easy to steal.
Yeah. That's
mail-in voting. That's why the Democrats want it.
Yeah.
That's why Trump was opposed to it. And Republicans. They're corrupt too, but they're not corrupt in the cunning, venal way that Democrats are. Republicans can't steal elections the way the Democrats can. The Republicans have to rely on the Supreme Court to steal an election for them, as they did in electing George W. Bush. But the Democrats are very good at stealing elections. They've done it forever, and they're behind this mail-in voting. So I assume they have some scheme for stealing the election with mail-in voting, because I think they realize they're not going to win and they're going to have to steal it. And I don't think, when they blame the white people for the rioting, the white people know they ain't done anything. So you'd have to be a pretty stupid white person to fall for that, but there are people stupid enough to fall for it. And then when they say, as Biden has been saying recently, that Trump is going to defund Social Security, that's just a blatant lie. Trump's never said anything about defunding Social Security. But when Biden, who's a candidate for president, can stand up and tell an obvious, transparent, outrageous lie and nothing happens, the media doesn't say, "What are you lying for?" Where did he say that? Oh, how is he going to do this? So when they're having to use lies, and when Nancy Pelosi says there mustn't be any debates between Biden and Trump, you have to assume that the Democrats believe they've already lost. And so they'll figure out how to steal it. And that's what they'll try to do. I don't know if they'll succeed or not. If they succeed in stealing it and it's obvious, then there's going to be more crisis.
All right.
All right.
Paul Craig Roberts, I know I've worked out pretty hard. Listen, I wasn't in disbelief of what you're saying. I'm just in disbelief that it's happening. I mean, what you're saying, you backed up, you researched it, you got people writing you. So I just want people to know that. I mean, it's just this obviously racist against white people that you got people writing you, tell you got to stand up and say I've sinned and I'm sorry for being white and it's awful. I mean, it's just awful.
Greg, what people don't know because they're so brainwashed, the real racism in America today is anti-white racism. It's the whites who suffer racism. They're the ones who are suffering the racism.
We're going to end it right there. Listen, I want to kind of pitch people that you put your website out, paulcraigroberts.org. You are a prolific writer. You send me stuff all the time. I'm embarrassed that I haven't had you on more. I've had an embarrassment of bookings, but I love having you on, and we'll get you on in the future. You're a brilliant guy. I have tons of respect for you. You are an ultra real journalist, and you're a smart guy. And I just love having you on. You also have a donation page. You've produced many books also. You can find those all on paulcraigroberts.org. The donation page, I put a link up for it. Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, thank you for joining us today on usawatchdog.com.
It's always a pleasure being on with you, Greg.
No, it's
all the best.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for being on.
Time.
All right, thanks for being on.
So long.